We're very happy today to have Renyi Zhang joining us from Texas A&U. We do allow those people here every now and then. No. Okay, but very happy to have you here. And tell us a little bit about Dr. Zhang and what he's going to be presenting to us. Renyi.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a great honor for me to introduce Professor Renyi Zhang. Dr. Zhang is distinguished professor at Texas University. He's a professor in the Department of Geological Sciences, also professor in the Department of Chemistry. Has been at Texas A&M since 1995. A very distinguished career. Received lots of accolades and the medals in our science. He received American Geophysical Union, and fellow of American Meteorological Society, and also fellow of American Association for Advancement of Science, and not mention many other great honors. Making too long list for me to read all of them. Really also a great friend of mine. We knew each other back to our college days. So he's 1 year senior than me. We know each other for more than
40 years.
40 years. And in college, he's my role model and source of inspiration. He's a great star student athlete, high jump, I think taller than me. and follow his career, always my great role model to follow. And I'm so happy finally came here to speak in front of our entire school. So without further ado, welcome Dr. Renyi Zhang.
Thanks a lot, Liang, for the very kind introduction. The one thing I think I have to mention that I'm also a big fan of you. I use your land models and in most of my model simulations. Yeah, so I actually been here before. I think last time I was here was 2019, which is before the pandemic. So it's a very nice comeback. Okay, so today I'm going to talk about Hurricane Harvey. Particularly, I try to make some case about industrial emissions. So a lot of you guys see this heard stories about Hurricane Harvey, and it's a Category 4 hurricane, and caused a lot of flooding in Houston, and it's the most costly hurricane ever happened. It's tied with Katrina, and this is a shot. This is Geosciences infrared image of Hurricane Harvey. You see this very well organized structures, eye walls, and storm structures, and of course Houston's here, and this is the storm track over the whole episode of the hurricane, and it's kind of funny. It's make landfall here close to Corpus Christi, and get inland and moving back a little bit, then come inland. The most interesting aspect here is that Hurricane Harvey didn't make landfall in Houston, and it's neither on the path, but most of the precipitation occurs in Houston. Just a little bit about the background of tropical cyclones. So basically, it's a cyclonic, has this kind of well-organized cyclonic structures, as the eye walls, the rim band, and etc. So what people like to ask here is that what really controls the genesis and also development of tropical cyclones. So people study the dynamics, including wind shear, vorticity, thermodynamic aspect such as moisture and sea surface temperature, and also there's a small cumulity, also looking for microphysical processes like particular hydrometeors. So one thing I do like to emphasize that the microphysical process is actually very important because this is a huge cyclonic system. So the cyclonic system normally is associated with lifting. So the air is going up. So when the air goes up, so the water becomes supersaturated, so condensation starts to occur. So that basically drives all the vertical motions. And also when so that form cloud hydrometeors. So when those hydrometeors involved in the downdraft, so they first, when they fall, they produce drag force. And second, also the particle, when they fall out of cloud, they start to evaporate. So the evaporation really drives those very strong downdraft. So the microphysical process is very important. And so I always like to make an argument, I think the cloud is really critical, to cloud formation. without cloud formation, we don't have any energy. So that all comes from the magic of the phase transformation. So whenever we have water molecules going from vapor to liquid to solid, so going vapor to solid, vapor to liquid, release this much energy, and going further down, liquid to ice, and additional energy release. And so of course, so this is associated with condensation, but when hydrometeors evaporate, okay, so that's the reverse process, then they start to cool the air. Okay, so the latent heat release and also the heat, so in the updraft region, they generate the buoyancy, but when they fall, they evaporate, they start to produce very strong, so that's the cooling part, to produce the downdraft part. And I taught a class last semester, thermodynamics, so I made up a small question here to my student. So this is an undergraduate level course. I gave them some ideas about how much precipitation falls out in Houston, about ½ meter on average. And I asked them to do some calculations. I gave them, if they know the area of Houston, how much precipitation received, how much energy is released, and also how much, how destructive this can be. So if you do just multiply the amount of precipitation by the latent heat of condensation, and you get this much energy. And alternatively, you can do some equivalency, how many nuclear bombs. It's like 60 to 80 nuclear bombs equivalent associated with Hurricane Harvey. So there's enormous energy release associated with the formation of hydrometeors. Of course, so the real question here is what really causing the catastrophic flooding during Hurricane Harvey. And so the hurricane community has done a lot of research to look into all the causes associated with climate change and etc. So this is a paper published by Peter Webster and companies, and they look into the increasing SST, and they made the conclusion that somehow they, based on what they have studied over the last 35 years, and they believe the increase in the global warming with increase in SST is responsible for producing more catastrophic hurricanes. And this is a paper also published in Nature some time ago. So the study used convection permitting regional models and try to look into how anthropogenic influence on tropical cyclone. So the conclusion here is that they concluded that relative to pre-industrial conditions, so the climate change basically enhanced the average and the extreme rainfall of Hurricane Katrina and others. And this is a reviewed paper published in Nature Geosciences a while ago. So it's looking into some historic aspect of tropical cyclones. And so one of the conclusions is that they believe there's a pretty large natural variability that you barely can tell, I mean, whether the hurricane frequency or intensity has been increased. And also they made some comments regarding how climate models, so most of the major climate models predict the hurricanes will become more destructive. And so there has been a pretty active research community, hurricane research community, particularly try to tie up the genesis and intensity of tropical cyclones to climate change. This is a nice article written by Kerry Emanuel from MIT, and so he actually looks very specifically to Hurricane Harvey's case. So the main conclusion from this paper is that the frequency of the Hurricane Harvey, if you assume those two periods is linear, and so this probability actually goes up by 6-fold. And some of you guys also have read this article here. So this is the model simulation using WRF. So they look into the urbanization. So what they have done is that they have run some sensitivity studies and to replace the urban landscape by cropland, and then to see the differences. So what they concluded was that so they find the probability of the Hurricane Harvey would increase 21 times during this period. So they basically attribute the urbanization as a major factor contributing to a Hurricane Harvey. So of course, I'm an aerosol person, so I like to ask questions about aerosols, and so here's some very basic aspect about aerosols and cloud formation. So to form aerosols, you need CCNs. So the CCN then give you cloud droplets. Typical size is about 20 micrometers, and under certain conditions, those cloud droplets grow into raindrops, and those aerosols basically are critical to form for cloud formation. And of course, to form ice cloud, you also need ice nucleating particles, INP, and there are quite a few different modes that the ice nucleating particle act to form ice crystals. So one aspect I like to emphasize here is that there's a very active community just to study aerosol nucleation. So this is not specifically for water droplets. So this is a review article I written up almost like 10 years ago. So if you consider the phase transformation from vapor, liquid to solid, so this process corresponding to a decreasing enthalpy, and also that's okay according to the first law. And also you look into the phase transformation here, so that also corresponds to a decreasing entropy, which is not favorable according to the second law. And so frequently, so this process also involves a free energy barrier. And of course, if you're doing vapor to liquid, you can write down the change in the Gibbs free energy. And so if your system is subsaturated, the Gibbs free energy will increase indefinitely. And if it's supersaturated, then initially the Gibbs free energy will increase and start to decrease. And so you can actually derive the so-called the relationship between the size and the radius of the aerosols. This is also known as the Kelvin equation. So you can calculate the critical radius and also the relative humidity dependence on the radius of this the droplets. So the whole point here is that it's not really easy to form cloud droplets because there are two barriers. So one is of the so-called free energy barrier. So your thermodynamic system approach equilibrium when the Gibbs free energy decreases to the minimum, and if you're going up, okay, if you're going up this process, okay, if you're going up, so that if your free energy is going up, that means it's non-spontaneous. And this is very common, like like if we go to cloud above 0 degrees C, a lot of times if the temperature is above 0 degrees C, water never freezes. They remain supercooled. And the reason for that is because there's free energy barrier. Okay, they don't freeze unless you have some ice nuclei. So that is the so-called free energy barrier. But that's not only it. So there's also another kinetic energy barrier that's associated with the curvature effect. So if you go to very small droplets, this radiative humidity or supersaturation become enormous. Okay, so typically inside the cloud, this would be the typical supersaturation, about 1%. And but if you go to very small droplets, just to maintain the droplets not evaporating, then you really need a very huge supersaturation. So the point is that you need cloud condensation nuclei to form cloud droplets. And of course, so the cloud formation is a very complicated process. Involves, like if you're going to involve warm precipitation that is a temperature below 0 degrees C, those are three very critical processes to form cloud. So you have to activate your cloud droplets, so somehow you have to exceed this barrier, so this process becomes spontaneous. And then the water molecules start to condense those to form cloud droplets, which is the growth by condensation. But this process is actually limited when the particle becomes larger. And another very important point is that just by condensation, you're never able to reach the size of raindrops, which is about millimeter size. So cloud droplets size typically is 20 micrometers. So if you're going to grow raindrops, then you need a separate process, and that is known as the collation coalescence process. And that is the only way that you're going to create raindrops. So a very important process to form warm precipitation is that somehow you have to switch from condensation growth to collation coalescence. And so this process initially is not very efficient, and later on it becomes very efficient. And that's the only way it's going to make raindrops. And of course, so dependent on how your aerosol, the initial concentrations, and so you can have very narrow distributions where you can have very broad distributions of cloud droplets, and then so that's going to affect your efficiency for the transition from condensation to collation coalescence. So that is a big issue in the cloud microphysical properties. If you have a lot of aerosols, so most likely you're going to run into this scenario. So this process becomes very inefficient, and therefore you're going to have limited warm precipitation. So if you push everything up, then basically you form very strong thunderstorm. But if you run into very clean conditions, so the wind, water, the more precipitation form easily, then they start to produce a downdraft, then the storm basically dissipate. So this could have enormous implications on cloud formation. And the other very important process concerning formation of precipitation is the so-called mixed phase. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, so water won't freeze because of free energy barrier. So in most of the cloud above 0 degrees C, you always have the coexistence of ice crystals, supercooled droplets, and even droplet particles. And how ice crystal grow in the mixed phase is actually because those two phases, so this is a supercooled droplet, this is ice crystal, so the equilibrium vapor pressure over ice crystal is actually much lower than those over supercooled droplets. And so the difference here actually gives you you're actually evaporating those supercooled droplets and grow your ice crystal. And this process can be really, really efficient in the mixed phase regime. As I mentioned, in the warm cloud, your supersaturation normally does not exceed 1%. But in the mixed phase, because the coexistence of those two, this is also known as the Bergman process, you can really generate a huge supersaturation, and then your mixed phase process is going to be extremely efficient. Okay, that is why typical raindrops only can go up to a millimeter, but your ice crystal can go up to a few centimeters. Because the supersaturation, such high saturation, and also that is very critical for another meteorological phenomenon, that's for lightning. And so you really have to have those three in order to separate the charge. So the point is that the collation of those will separate the charge, then small particles move up, the big particles come down, then you build up the charge. Then when you build up the charge, they start to discharge, and you make lightning. So this whole cloud microphysical process is extremely important. Of course, everything has been very well recognized by IPCC. So IPCC thinks the direct effect. And also clean condition, you have numerous big particles. And but if the cloud is polluted, then the particle become numerous. So the cloud albedo would be different, and also the drizzles, the warm precipitation will be suppressed, and the cloud can be much more extended vertically, and also the lifetime of cloud all being changed. And of course, so one of the big point about IPCC is that when they evaluate all the climate forcing terms, so greenhouse gas and some chemicals, and the most uncertain element is associated with aerosols. So aerosol radiative effect, aerosol cloud interaction in particular represent the largest uncertainty in climate prediction. And I like to show this picture here to make another point about aerosols. So this is global lighting distribution people measure from satellite. Okay, you see most of the lighting occur over land. Very few people over oceans. So there are two arguments. The one argument is that land has a very large, very small heat capacity, so heat up very easily. So in the summertime, you generate strong convection. So that's one argument. The second argument for people like myself and in cloud microphysical processes try to explain is it has to do with microphysics. So anywhere you go over oceans, you have very few aerosols. So your cesium concentration is very low, whereas your over continents, the cesium concentration is almost always a water magnitude higher. And so basically, so in marine conditions, you're going to form warm precipitation easily, but over continental conditions, the warm precipitation is suppressed. So then you go to a mixed phase. Mixed phase separates charge, make lightning. So that's an argument I always like to make. And also over the last few years, quite a few years, we also start to look into how aerosols impact tropical cyclone. And so this is a paper we published in Nature Geosciences in 2014. We run models with, this is like a cloud resolving models under different aerosol scenarios. And so this is very clean condition. This is with aerosol cloud interactions and also with aerosol cloud and aerosol radiation interaction. You see this is the development, the intensity of cloud, the hurricanes are very different. And also people are paying attention to like the interaction between Sahara dust and the tropical cyclones. And this is a very inspiring article published in Geos. And so the story was that, so we have two hurricane seasons, 2005 versus 2006. And 2005 is very active hurricane seasons, including Hurricane Katrina. And then the National Hurricane Center made a prediction, even in August 2006. They said, hey, 2006 is probably going to be worse, at least above average. But it turns out there's nothing happened in 2006. so one of the hypotheses why, so one of the reasons why. So this paper basically say, hey, you probably have to include the dust. So they look into the aerosol optical depths. There's a lot of dust over the Gulf of Mexico, the Atlantic regions. So that may actually suppress the SST and suppress precipitation. So this paper believes the dust, Sahara dust actually is probably mainly responsible for the failure of the National Hurricane Center to predict the hurricane seasons in 2006. We also published a paper several years ago around climate models, and we sort of like, the climate model is kind of very difficult to resolve the hurricane processes, but we did find some evidence that the dust is a critical factor. So now turning attention to Harvey and Houston. So I've been doing air quality studies in Houston for almost like 20 years. And so we did measurements here. So the big point here about Houston is a big urban city. There's a lot of industrial infrastructures. And we did some aerosol measurements. So regardless where the wind is coming from, and whether northerly wind or versus southerly wind, you always see huge aerosol particles. And you can do the trajectory analysis. So one of the aspects people think is this sea breeze circulation actually circulate the air back and forth and can create very high ozone concentration, of course, can also increase the PM. So this is a paper published by, I'm a co-author on this article. It's published to study lightning over Houston. So this is basically based on National Lightning Detection Network, 10 years range, and cloud to ground. So what you see here is that there's a lot of lightning in the summer times in Houston. Okay, so the lightning map basically maps with coincide with the city map, and so there was several reasons we believe probably has to do with aerosols and also the urban heat island effect, which is which may actually help, and also the sea breeze. And my group has done a lot of work, mainly from the modeling perspectives, to look into aerosol cloud interactions to try to study summertime convective cloud, cumulus cloud. So this is a model studies published a long time ago by Jiwen Fan. She was my former PhD student. And so he used the spectrum beam microphysical models, and for this maritime conditions versus clean conditions and polluted conditions. So with different amount of aerosols, you see the strongest cloud development show up in the polluted case. We also developed a different microphysical approach schemes using both two-moment schemes. And in this paper, we successively increasing the aerosol concentration, looking to the total precipitation. You see initially increases, then up to certain values start to decline. So we have seen those aerosol effect on deep convective clouds, so aerosols may actually play a very important effect. So now I'm actually going to present some data analysis during Hurricane Harvey, just to see what we see and how can we link those to the aerosol effect. And showing here are the lightning measurement. This is by Geosciences, lightning from 26 to 28 August. And this is by NLDA, National Net. And the very interesting you see here is that most of the lightning during Hurricane Harvey occurs in Houston. And there's a really lot of lightning in Houston. It's just emphasize on this very individual spot. Okay, and so there are two maximum values. If we map this to the Google map, and they are actually not in urban places. They actually are sort of. So this is the wind is basically blowing this direction here. So those are directly underneath the downwind of the industrial facility. And what's really amazing is the lightning occur continuously at the same spot, which doesn't make sense. And when I went to undergraduate studies, my major was studying weather modification. So people actually try to see cloud. So to me, I think this looked like exactly Cloud City. So those industry facilities, they kept operating even during the storms, unless they get flooded. I mean, on the 27, 28, then it shut down the facility. So those combustion process continues to generate aerosols, and we believe those may actually be tied up. And amazingly, you see the lightning map, sort of this is a precipitation map, and also this all looks similar with the climatology. So the question here is this a coincidence, or it's just or there's those industrial facilities really play a big role. So that is a question I will try to address. Okay, just give you some perspective about aerosol distribution in Houston. So this is from the National Emission Inventory, looking to PM 2.5 emissions. It's a lot of, and some of those actually kind of difficult from the emission to pick up. But you see in this place, there's a lot of aerosol emissions. So this is a MODIS picture, the AOD, the aerosol optical depth, the prior to the storms from 2017 to 24, and you definitely see the hot spot here. But the satellite has a very poor spatial resolution. I mean, when you're toward the local Houston case, we actually use this geographic patterns to drive our model simulation and try to understand the aerosol effect. And so this is called Houston lightning mapping array. It's a very nice facility. It was acquired by NSF MRI, and so it's basically just monitoring lightning in four-dimensional patterns. So it's cover entire regions in Houston. I will show some data from this, and my colleagues. Tim Logan, he is now actually the director for the Houston Lightning Mapping Array. He published a nice paper in GER about lightning during Hurricane Harvey. But this is what we see during Hurricane Harvey. Okay, so this is a cloud visible image, and you see a lot of lightnings at the two spots. It's just the lightning just like that two spots somehow. And you see the wind directions. So this definitely is just underneath the power plants, the industrial facilities. And I think he told me, I mean, there were all this Houston lightning mapping array recorded almost 2 million lightning counts during Hurricane Harvey over the 4 or 5 days here. It's just that many lightning. And so it's really get a lot of information. You can see the vertical structures. And so this is the event occur over the 15 minutes time period. I mean, how many lightnings occur during that event? It just concentrate on that spot. I mean, and also the temporal, the vertical, and radar reflectivity. And so there's a lot of lightning and very intensive convection development. And so this is the next generation radar data. So I wanted you to focus on this area here. You see a lot of radar reflectivity just at the Houston. So this is the Houston area. So we actually try to emphasize on two storm, two periods. So one is when the hurricane made, one period produced a lot of precipitation, and there's another period when the storm actually come back. So again, so most of those heavy precipitation, flooding, actually focus in the Houston region. Okay, so the question is, can we actually run some model simulations, try to understand, can we reasonably forecast precipitation and also the aerosol to understand the aerosol effect? So we use a WRF model with our own cloud microphysical schemes. So that scheme can actually resolve the aerosol effect. And so this is a model of the grid spacing. So 27, 3, 9, and 3 kilometers vortex following. And we got a lot of help from our my friend Fuqing Zhang, using data simulation, try to get a better simulation of cloud. And we also do like a land surface model and try to get a reasonable representation of the land use. And in our model simulation, we try to consider 2 aerosol scenarios. So one is a clean case, the other is the polluted case. Those are basically very consistent with measurement that we did in Houston. Also, of course, we have a sea salt, also we have dust. And also, in our model simulation, we try to put a continuous source of emission during the storms. This is just a summary of the microphysical processes. And by the way, so this is a 2-moment scheme. So computationally, it's very effective. But this is a scheme that most of the operation forecast models do not consider. So they don't actually consider the CCN or the ice cloud concentration. So they have the cloud droplet concentration fixed. So in our case, we actually do the prognostic CCN and to calculate the cloud droplets concentration. There are many microphysical processes, and including ice nucleation particles. So this is how we constrain our domain. So this is 2 nest domains. This is a Houston area, an auto domain. And we try to calculate precipitation under the sensitivity studies between the two cases. Again, so we try to use reasonable geographic distributions for aerosols based on satellite and also our previous field measurements. So this is the so-called clean conditions, and then we run a polluted case. So this is how the size distribution between the two cases. And also in our model simulation, we add a continuous source of emission of aerosols during the storm to see how that impacts the lightning and precipitation development. And so then we have done analysis to see how the aerosols impact like the liquid water and ice water. So this is a clean case. You see there's some liquid water, but you add the aerosol, increase the aerosol concentration. So the ice also went up, the liquid went up, and that's a difference between this right panel here is the difference between the clean and the polluted case. We can also calculate the supersaturation between the two cases. So warm precipitation, the supersaturation is not very high, but in the polluted case, it actually decreases because a lot of water condenses. And the mixed phase gives you huge supersaturation, so you run into very energetic convect storms. And this is so-called the contour frequency by altitude diagrams, CFAD, and this latent heat rate, vertical velocity, mixing ratio, and hydrometeor. So the point here is that so this is the two precipitation period that I just showed. So when precipitation period 1, I have a lot of flooding in Houston, and then stage 2. So in both cases, you see adding aerosols just make a lot of more precipitation, make the storm much stronger, and also in terms of the ice, the ice processes. Again, so increasing aerosols will do what? Increased aerosols basically will decrease the effective radius of cloud droplets, so that will basically suppress the accretion coalescence process. So under polluted case, and the polluted case, so the effective radius is very small, so you have hard time to form warm precipitation. But under polluted case, under clean case, then you can easily form warm precipitation that actually have the tendency to downgrade the storm intensity. So overall, those are our model simulations, aerosol-induced cyclonic precipitation lightning. So this is over the entire period. This is observation. This is with a lower aerosol concentration, which we call the clean case, and a polluted case. You see there the aerosol actually significantly increased the precipitation, and so this is the difference between clean and polluted case. So this is how we simulate precipitation. So in our model, we also have an index for lightning, which we can also try to compare with lightning distributions. So with clean case, very few lightning. With polluted case, you get a lot more lightning, and the pattern actually seems to represent more close. It's more consistent with the model simulations. By the way, so this is actually the prediction made by the National Hurricane Center, the National Weather Service. It's called 72 Hours Quantitative Precipitation Forecast, QPF, issued by NOAA. And of course, so they predict most of the major precipitation occurs at the place the hurricane makes the landfall. And of course, that really didn't help much for the case of Houston. And so they just completely miss up the flooding in Houston. And so this is the additional model sensitivity studies. So this is the case we actually run the model sensitivity with and without continuous aerosol emissions in Houston. So again, so we put a continuous aerosol source here. Okay, so this is with the aerosol source in Houston, and so there's a lot of precipitation, but with no continuous, and then we get this kind of patterns here, and the difference is plotted here, and also how this show up in the total precipitation. Okay, and also we made some comparisons about the storm. Okay, so those are basically some comparisons of precipitation, accumulated precipitations, and so the solid line here is the measurement, the measured precipitation in Houston, and this is with a smaller aerosol concentration. This is more realistic aerosol concentration. You see the model actually perform better with the elevated aerosol concentrations, and also we split this into the two precipitation period that has produced a lot of flood, the precipitation, that rain 1 and rain 2. So in both cases, you see the increase in aerosol concentration gave you more realistic and also more precipitation in the Houston area. And also, so one of the big tasks try to make a good forecast about Hurricane Harvey is because the trajectory is kind of very difficult to simulate, and so we actually try to compare our model simulations. So this is track of the hurricanes, and this is the observation. Those are the two schemes with clean versus polluted. So in general, I think our model actually does a pretty good job in terms of simulating the tracks, and I think that is mainly attributed to the fact that we get help with the data simulation, so we actually, so the polluted case actually seems perform a little better. I mean, try to capture, but the overturn of the in the track. But overall, I think the model does a very good job in terms of simulating the hurricane, the track of the storm. And also we made some comparisons for the intensity. So people normally characterize hurricanes in terms of the minimum pressure, which is on the left, and also the maximum wind speed. So that is the main parameter, the main indexes people use to characterize the intensity of tropical cyclones or hurricane. Again, so the solid line here are the measured maximum pressure, and also the minimum pressure and the maximum wind during Hurricane Harvey, and the different colors. This is the polluted case versus clean case, and I think in both cases, I think adding aerosols actually going to give you a better simulation. So the other question I try to argue here is the intensity really a big factor, or you really have to emphasize on the precipitation patterns, particularly those highly inhomogeneous precipitation like the flooding produced in Houston. So coming back to the big picture, so what we think aerosols are important. So you can. It's a very good cases. I mean, for Hurricane Harvey, and so you have clean locations, you have polluted locations, and particularly most of the industrial facilities actually kept operating during the storms. So you can either run into clean case versus the polluted case. So we believe it's all start with this very important processes of cloud condensation nuclei, the CCN concentration. So if you dependent on how many aerosols become activated, and then so that determines how many the size distribution of cloud droplets, how efficiently you're going to form one precipitation. So in a clean case, you're going to have a lot of better chance to form one precipitation. You generate a downdraft, then you get some precipitation, but that's not causing the flooding. But if you have continuous emissions of aerosols, like the case I refer as a cloud seeding, so you continuously inject aerosols, and then you generate numerous of cloud droplets, and then you really have a hard time to initiate warm precipitation associated with a cyclonic lifting. Everything goes up. Then in the mixed phase, you really run into very efficient cloud microphysical processes. You're going to produce a lot you're going to produce some big aerosol, some big ice crystals and some whirlpools, and they start the collisions, charge separation. They generate a lot of lightning, and of course a lot more flooding because this aerosol effect. And so one of the projects we try to also try to initiate is that a former student of mine, he's currently working at NOAA. He actually developed a so-called cell tracking technique. And so he can look into 4D, so lightning, radar, and then go exactly from the source to the place you generate radar reflective lightning to see whether you can actually really track down who is sitting there, who is creating the problem for the flooding. And so that's a project we are actually try to get involved. And fortunately, because all the high-tech things, the lightning data, the NOAA precipitation data, that really enable you to do very specific storm tracking and to really pin down. I mean, like the sources of those aerosol particles. And of course, I've been talking to Liang and also Dave. I think you guys realize enormous expertise looking for the urban characteristics. They very fine, very careful. I mean, a beautiful like a methodology to treat the surface layer. So the combination of those probably going to significantly increase the accuracy in the future for hurricane forecast. Yeah, so basically, depending on whether you have clean conditions, then you run into the clean conditions, you run into this very efficient warm rain precipitation. You produce some precipitation, but probably not that much flooding. But with the polluted aerosols, and you're basically sitting in the cloud continuously, and you just continuously generate lighting inside. Of course, the hydrometeor get dispersed into the whole region, and then you get this whole region flooded. I think there's a very strong indication that those industrial facilities really play a very important role in terms of causing the flooding, the lightning during Hurricane Harvey. And so that's basically that's basically what we call as cloud invigoration, to make more efficient mixed phase precipitation and a lot more lightning. And that's why we think the industrial emission really is one of the big contributor to the flooding during Hurricane Harvey. This paper, by the way, was published in 2020 in GRL. So in conclusions, there being strong evidence indicating that aerosols really play a very important role. So either natural aerosols or anthropogenic aerosols really can have a major impact on the genesis and intensity of tropical cyclones. Of course, in this talk, in the study, we emphasize primarily anthropogenic aerosols. We believe the industrial aerosols really is one of the major factors in contributing to the flooding during Hurricane Harvey. We believe this dramatically increased precipitation and lightning, at least by a factor of 2 during Hurricane Harvey. And we really believe that it's really important. If you're going to make good hurricane prediction, you have to accurately represent the cloud microphysical processes. The model has to be able to resolve the cloud microphysical process. And when the National Hurricane Center make their predictions, they use some cloud microphysics, which they do not resolve. They cannot resolve the aerosol effect. Basically, they fix the cloud droplets concentration. I said they use very low concentration for cloud droplets during Hurricane Harvey. I think that's the main reason they fail. At least one of the major reasons they fail with their prediction. With that, I'd like to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions.